Picture this scenario. It's been a week. The
Yeah.
kind of week, deadlines, family stress, just general chaos.
Yep.
And you keep seeing these articles online saying mindfulness is the answer.
Yeah.
It's the silver bullet.
Right. Just meditate.
Exactly. So you finally decide to do it. You download the app. Maybe you light that expensive candle you've been saving. You find a quiet corner and you close your eyes. You are ready for that wave of Zen to just wash over you. But instead of peace, your heart starts hammering against your ribs. Your palms are sweating.
Or maybe worse, you just feel gone, like you're floating in a dark, empty void.
And the immediate thought is usually, I am terrible at this. Everyone else is reaching enlightenment and I'm just sitting here panicking.
Precisely. You think I'm broken or my brain is just too loud.
And you probably never open that app again. But what if that reaction isn't a failure? What if it's actually your body trying to save your life?
And that is the core question we are tackling today. We're doing a deep dive into a really significant 2023 thesis by Leslie Formby. It's titled Making Mindfulness More Accessible, a Practical Guide to Trauma-Informed Mindfulness.
And I want to be clear right off the top, this isn't just a how-to guide for better relaxation.
Yeah.
This research argues that the standard way we teach meditation, sit still, close your eyes, look inward, can actually be dangerous for a huge chunk of the population.
Dangerous is not an exaggeration here. Formby's work, which builds on clinical research from experts like David Treleaven, suggests that without a trauma-informed approach, generic mindfulness instructions can lead to re-traumatization.
Which is such a heavy concept. So our mission today is to unpack why our brains react this way. We need to look at the biology of trauma.
Not just the psychology.
Exactly. And then walk through the 5 pillars that can fix it. Because honestly, reading this completely flipped my idea of what meditation is allowed to look like.
It challenges the entire aesthetic of the wellness industry, essentially.
Big time. But before we get to the fix, we have to define the scale of the problem. I think there's this assumption that when we say trauma, we're talking about a very small, specific group of people. Combat veterans, survivors of major natural disasters, the outlier cases.
That is the first myth we really need to bust. Formby grounds her thesis in some staggering statistics to show just how ubiquitous this is.
Okay.
She cites a massive 2016 study that surveyed people across 24 different countries. They found that over 70% of respondents had experienced a traumatic event.
70%. So if I walk into a yoga class with, say, 20 people, 14 of them are statistically carrying this.
At least. And if you zoom in on the United States specifically, the numbers are even higher.
Really?
Yeah, the U.S. rate of trauma exposure in that study was 82.7%.
Wait, 82%? That seems incredibly high for a developed nation not currently in a war zone.
It is high. In that particular data set, the U.S. ranked 3rd globally for trauma exposure, right behind Ukraine and Peru.
That is wild.
Yeah.
We think of ourselves as safe, but statistically, we're walking around with a massive collective trauma load.
We are. And we have to look at where that comes from. Formby relies heavily on the landmark Folletti study from 1998 on ACE's adverse childhood experiences.
Right.
These are things like abuse, neglect, witnessing domestic violence, or growing up with a family member suffering from addiction. That study found that 52% of people had at least one ACE.
And if I recall correctly, a significant portion had multiple.
1 in 4 had 2 or more. And this is where we have to pivot from statistics to biology.
Okay.
Why does an event that happened 20 years ago matter when you're trying to focus on your breath today? The research describes something called the Trauma Default Network, or TDN.
Is that a play on the default mode network? I've heard of that. The brain state where we daydream? Right.
Exactly. When a healthy brain is at rest, it goes into the default mode network, wandering, planning, imagining. It's relaxed.
Right.
But for someone with significant unintegrated trauma, their default setting shifts. The TDN is characterized by a sort of chronic vigilance.
So the brain is just constantly scanning for threat.
Constantly. Even when you're sitting on a yoga mat in a perfectly safe room, it's like a security system that has a glitch and won't turn off.
And it's not just the brain. There was one detail in the research about the gut that I found particularly compelling.
Oh, the behavioral immune system.
Yeah, I circled that 3 times in my notes. I always thought gut feelings were just a metaphor, but this is literal biology.
It is literal. We know the gut and brain are connected, the gut-brain axis, but Formby highlights that damage to neurodevelopment from trauma can actually start in the gut microbiome.
Wow.
You have this behavioral immune system in your stomach that is designed to detect pathogens, bad bacteria, poisons, but trauma can hijack it.
So your stomach starts reacting to social poisons.
Essentially. It
Hmm.
can react to environmental stimuli, a smell, a tone of voice, a feeling of confinement with disgust or avoidance before your conscious brain even processes what is happening.
So you might walk into a meditation studio and your gut is literally screaming unsafe before you've even taken off your shoes.
Exactly. That gives a whole new meaning to trust your gut. It's not just intuition, it's a neuroimmune response rejecting the environment.
And we have to layer on the concept of polyvictimization,
Right. It's a term the source uses to describe the cumulative burden. It's rarely just one bad or car accident. It's the layers. Household dysfunction, community violence, financial instability, systemic racism.
it's a stack. You're carrying a stack of bricks.
And that stack alters your neurobiology from conception all the way to death. So when that person sits down to just breathe, they aren't starting from neutral. They are starting from a place of biological adaptation to threat.
Okay, so we've established that trauma is ubiquitous.
Yeah.
It's most of us.
Right.
Now, here's the paradox that really confuses me. We have data showing mindfulness lowers blood pressure, reduces inflammation,
Yeah.
helps anxiety. It's clinically proven. So why does it backfire?
It comes down to the mechanism of attention. Standard mindfulness instructions rely heavily on interoception.
Which is the fancy word for feeling what's happening inside.
Correct. Notice your heartbeat. Feel the sensation in your chest. Scan your body. But for a trauma survivor, the internal world is often where the danger lives. The body is where the trauma is stored.
I see. So if the trauma is locked in the body, paying attention to the body is like looking at the trauma.
Precisely. If you ask someone with unintegrated trauma to close their eyes and focus intensely on their internal sensations, you are essentially asking them to walk into a dark room where they were previously hurt and then locking the door.
Wow. That is a terrifying image. So instead of relaxation, the brain screams, danger.
Exactly. It triggers what's called the fear immobility cycle. And this brings us to the most critical concept in this entire thesis, the window of tolerance.
I love this concept. I feel like this explains so much about my own daily life, even outside of meditation.
It's a visual tool. Imagine a zone, a window, where you can function. You're alert, you're calm, you can learn, you can relate to people. That's the window.
And if stress pushes you out the top of the window,
That is hyperarousal. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in.
fight or flight.
Fight or flight, anxiety, racing heart, anger, overwhelm.
And if you drop out the bottom,
Hyperarousal.
yeah.
The freeze response. Numbing out, dissociation, feeling empty or spacey.
Okay, so here is the light bulb moment for me. I used to think zoning out during meditation meant I was just bored or tired. But you're saying that could be hyperarousal.
Absolutely. It's a defense mechanism. And here is the key insight for trauma survivors. Their window of tolerance is usually much smaller.
It takes less to push them out.
So much less. And this is the kicker. Standard meditation instructions like prolonged silence or forced stillness can actually push someone right out of their window.
So the cure causes the symptom. The research even has a name for this, MRAEs.
Meditation-related adverse effects. We are talking about flashbacks, panic attacks, and re-experiencing traumatic memories.
And the tragedy is these are hugely underreported.
Because people think they're just bad at meditating. They think it's a discipline problem, not a nervous system problem.
Right. They force themselves to sit through it, which only reinforces the trauma response.
Exactly.
So if the standard sit down and shut up method is a minefield for 80% of us, what do we do? Formby's thesis isn't just doom and gloom, it offers a roadmap. She adapts David Treleaven's 5 pillars of trauma-informed mindfulness.
Yeah, let's break these down because they are super practical.
Okay. Pillar 1 is know the window of tolerance.
This starts with self-awareness. The source suggests using a simple arousal scale from 0 to 10.
How does that work in practice? Do I need a chart?
No, you can just visualize a gauge. 0 is shut down, exhaustion, hyperarousal.
Okay.
And 10 is panic, hyperarousal. You want to be somewhere in the middle, say a 4 to a 6. That's the zone where you are present.
So before I even try to meditate, I check the gauge. Am I vibrating at a 9 or am I slumping at a 1?
Exactly. And you look for physical signs. Hyperarousal looks like shallow breathing, rigid muscles, sweating.
And hyperarousal.
Hyperarousal looks like a collapsed posture, a flat facial expression, or glazed eyes.
That glazed eyes thing is tricky, isn't it? Because I feel like I've seen people in yoga classes who look super zen, staring into space, but maybe they're actually just dissociated.
That is a critical distinction we need to make. Stillness does not always equal peace.
Right.
Sometimes stillness is a freeze response. If you see someone who looks checked out, they might be in survival mode, not zen mode.
So if you check your gauge and you're outside the window, what do? That leads to pillar 2, redirect focus, or changing the anchor.
This is where we have to kill a sacred cow. The breath.
The breath. It's the
Yeah.
holy grail of meditation. Just watch your breath. Why is that a problem?
Because the breath is intimately tied to our emotional state. If you've ever had a panic attack or asthma or a near-drowning experience, your breath is a source of stress, not safety.
It can act as a trigger.
A direct trigger.
So if I can't watch my breath, what am I supposed to watch?
You shift from interoception, internal, to exteroception, external. You pick an anchor outside of your body. Sound is a great one. Just listening to the hum of the fridge or cars outside, or a visual object. The source explicitly says, you can keep your eyes open.
See, that feels like cheating. If my eyes are open, am I really meditating?
You are. In fact, for a trauma survivor, keeping the eyes open and soft, focusing on a plant or spot on the rug, tells the brain, I can see my surroundings, I am safe.
It orients you in the present moment. It stops the brain from hallucinating threats in the dark.
Precisely. And if the mind is really racing, the source suggests cognitive focused breathing. Give the brain a job so it can't ruminate.
Like counting.
Counting is good, or ratio breathing, making the exhale longer than the inhale. So inhale for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 8.
Why the longer exhale? Is that just to distract me?
It's a physiological hack. A long exhale stimulates the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest mode.
The rest and digest mode. It forces your heart rate to slow down. It's not about clearing your mind. It's about manually hacking your biology to get back in the window of tolerance.
I like that. Hacking the biology.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to pillar 3. Be mindful of the body. This seems tricky if, as we said, the body is the crime scene.
It is delicate. The goal is to work with dissociation without forcing it. The source emphasizes empowering choice.
So, no more don't move rules.
Right. The idea that you must be statue still is very rigid and often unhelpful. If you feel anxiety rising, rock back and forth, stretch, wiggle your toes.
Discharge that energy.
Exactly. There was also a mention of supportive self-touch.
Which sounds a little strange at first, but what is the science there?
It's actually very grounding. Placing a hand on your heart or holding your own hands or even giving yourself a squeeze.
What does that do?
It sends a tactile signal of containment. It says to the nervous system, I am here, I have boundaries, I am holding you.
It bridges the gap. It brings you back into your body gently rather than forcing you to scan every inch of it.
Exactly. It shifts the power dynamic from I must submit to the stillness to I am taking care of myself.
Now, we can't talk about this in a vacuum. We aren't just brains floating in jars. Pillar 4 is the power of connection.
We are social animals. We have what's called a social engagement system, or SES. According to polyvagal theory, our nervous systems are constantly scanning other people for safety cues.
Tone of voice, facial expression, body language.
All of it. So if I'm in a class and the teacher is cold or distant or has that guru vibe where they don't really look at you,
Your SES might read that as a threat.
or at least a lack of safety, healing happens in relationships. Mindfulness shouldn't be an isolated struggle where you're locked in a room battling your demons alone.
It's about co-regulation, right? Borrowing someone else's calm.
Yes. If a student starts to panic, a regulated, compassionate teacher can literally help bring their nervous system back down just by being present and calm.
Which leads us to the final and maybe the biggest pillar. Pillar 5, social context.
The elephant in the room?
It is. We have to acknowledge who is in the room and what they are carrying.
Right. We mentioned earlier that trauma isn't just a car accident, it's systemic. Racism, sexism, homophobia, poverty.
So if you are a person of color walking into a wellness space that is entirely white, expensive, and ignores cultural context, you aren't just stressed. You're carrying a systemic burden that the space might be actively making worse.
Exactly. Formby argues that a neutral mindfulness space doesn't exist. If an instructor ignores these realities, they risk what Sam HSA calls re-traumatization.
The source mentions Sam H's 4 R's as a framework for organizations.
Realize the widespread impact of trauma, recognize the signs, respond by integrating knowledge, and, the big one, resist re-traumatization.
Resist re-traumatization. That feels like the bumper sticker for this whole deep dive. If your wellness program makes people feel unsafe or unseen, it's failing.
It is, and it shifts the responsibility. It's not just on the student to try harder. It's on the facilitator to create a container that can actually hold the reality of the human experience.
It's incredibly empowering. It basically says, if meditation feels bad, stop. You aren't broken. The method just needs to be adapted to your nervous system.
That is the core message. The goal of mindfulness is not to become a statue. The goal is integration. It is about linking the parts of the brain and body together safely
It's about widening that window of tolerance.
so you can experience life more fully, not just shutting down to escape it.
So to recap, trauma is the norm, not the exception. Standard internal focus can trigger the trauma default network or a gut reaction, but we can hack it by checking our window of tolerance, using external anchors like sound or sight, moving our bodies, and seeking safe connection.
A comprehensive toolkit for making these practices actually work for the people who need them most.
Before we wrap up, there was one thought in the conclusion of the source material that really stuck with me. It's a bit of a challenge to the whole Zen aesthetic.
It is a provocative point to leave on. We tend to praise the student who sits perfectly still for an hour, who is quiet, who never fidgets. We look at them and think, wow, they are so advanced.
But based on what we've learned today,
Based on the physiology of trauma, that stillness might actually be hyperarousal.
a freeze response.
It might be the freeze response. They might be disassociating to survive the silence.
So the question is, if we view checking out and withdrawing as the ultimate goal of meditation, are we actually praising a trauma response rather than true mindfulness?
It's a question that certainly changes how I look at a quiet room.
Something to sit with, but maybe keep your eyes open while you do it. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Take care.